Hey there, tonight we are slipping through the green baize door of a great Victorian country house, down the hidden staircase and into the servants' hall, to uncover the secret life of the 30 people who actually ran it. The family upstairs believed the house ran on their money and their ancient name, and the servants downstairs knew perfectly well that it ran on them, and both sides agreed, politely and permanently, never to mention it. That arrangement worked beautifully for about 200 years, which makes it one of the most successful secrets in British history. And tonight, it is ours. Before we begin, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here, and leave a comment telling me where in the world you are listening from and what time it is there. Somehow, it is always 2 a.m. somewhere. Now, dim the lights. Put on a fan if you like that soft wash of white noise. Sink into your pillow, let your shoulders come down from around your ears, and let the day go. It was never really yours anyway. It belonged to everyone who wanted something from you, which, as it happens, is exactly the feeling we're about to explore. Have you ever wondered who lit the fires in a 40-room mansion before anyone upstairs was awake? Or why every third housemaid in England answered to a name that was not hers? How did a family's most private business travel 5 miles to the next great house before luncheon in a world with no telephones? Why was a footman paid partly by the inch, and why did the butler sleep beside the silver with a pistol older than himself? And the strangest question of all, if the people upstairs never once saw the work being done, who exactly did they imagine was doing it? And now, congratulations. You have just woken up in 1888, in a narrow iron bed under the roof of a house called Ashcombe Hall, deep in the green English countryside. You are 19 years old, you are the newest housemaid on a staff of 30, and in roughly 4 minutes, a bell is going to start the longest, strangest, most secretly powerful day of your working life. Your candle is on the left. Try not to wake, Ruth. The attic is dark and profoundly cold, because heat in this house is something you carry to other people. You share the room with Ruth, the second housemaid, who sleeps 4 feet away with her braid over her face and her breath making little clouds, and who has the enviable talent of ignoring the first knock entirely. The knock comes at 5:30. It is Betsy, the scullery maid, who is 14 and has already been awake for half an hour, and who taps each attic door down the corridor like a small determined woodpecker before vanishing back down the stairs to her kingdom of kettles. You wash at the washstand, and in January that means cracking a skin of ice off the water in the jug with the back of your hairbrush. A sound like a spoon going into a very cold pudding. There is no looking glass bigger than a schoolbook, which is just as well, because vanity is not on this morning's list. On goes the print dress, cotton, lilac striped, faded from 100 boilings. On go the black stockings and the boots. On goes the apron. And over your hair goes the cap. And the cap matters, because the cap is the uniform of your invisibility. And invisibility, you are learning, is the whole art of this house. Everything you own in the world lives in a tin trunk under your bed. And everyone in service calls it the same thing. Your box, a spare dress, a Bible from your mother, a ribbon you have worn twice, 4 letters, and a small purse holding your fortune, which currently stands at 11 shillings. When a servant leaves a place, the household says she has packed her box. When a servant is thrown out in disgrace, they say she was sent off with her box on the next cart. An entire life, with a handle on each end. You push it back under the bed with your heel, straighten your cap by feel, and go out into the corridor, where the boards are so cold they feel wet, and down the back stairs in the dark, counting the turns, because you have been here 5 weeks, and you have already learned the first great secret of Ashcombe Hall, which is that there are 2 houses standing on this one patch of ground, and only one of them is ever meant to be seen. And as you feel your way down the cold spiral, give a thought to how you came to be on it at all, because nobody arrives in a house like this by accident. You were got here the way every girl at this level of service is got anywhere. Through the registry office in the market town, a narrow shop between a saddler and a bank, with a window full of cards and a ledger full of lives. Your mother took you in on a Tuesday, in your good dress, a month after your 17th birthday, and a woman with spectacles on a chain looked you over the way farmers look over weather, wrote down your height, your church, your experience, which was 2 years as general girl to the doctor's household, and your character, which is to say the letter, because you do not exist in this profession without the letter. Yours was from the doctor's wife, 4 lines, honest, sober, willing, a good plain worker, and your mother carried it to the registry office inside her glove as if it were a banknote, which, in every way that matters, it was. Then came the waiting, and then the card, and then the interview, which was not with the Countess. Of course, grand families do not hire housemaids any more than admirals coil rope. It was with Mrs. Hartley, in the housekeeper's room of this very house, across a table with a pot of tea on it that was never poured. She read the letter twice. She asked whether you were walking out with anyone, and watched you while you said no. She asked what your father did, and whether you had your health, and whether you understood that the family was never to be spoken of in the village. Never to anyone on any subject. And you said yes, and meant it. And she looked at you a long moment in a silence you now recognize as her signature, and said, £16, print dresses found, 1 afternoon a week. We will call you Mary, and that, complete, was the founding treaty of your entire present life. Your mother spent more than she should have on the tin box and the second print dress. The carrier's cart brought you and the box 11 miles on a Thursday, and set you down not at the great gates but at the back lane, as is proper, and you walked the last quarter mile with the box handle biting your fingers, past the kitchen garden wall, under the clock arch, to the door with the boot scraper, which is your door, the only door of this house you will ever use. Betsy opened it before you knocked. She had been watching for you from the scullery window, because a new girl is an event, and she took one end of the box and looked you up and down with frank 14-year-old thoroughness, and delivered her verdict, which you treasure yet. "You will do," she said. The last one cried before supper. 5 weeks on, you have not cried before supper once. After supper, twice, quietly, into the bolster, in the first fortnight, which Ruth heard and never mentioned, because that too is the code of the corridor under the roof. Everyone cried the first fortnight. Nobody ever saw anybody do it. Here is the geography they do not put in the guidebooks. Ashcombe Hall has a front staircase of pale stone that rises through the great hall like something out of a painting, wide enough for 4 people abreast, with a carved oak banister that took some Jacobean carpenter a year of his life. You have been at this house 5 weeks, and you have never once set foot on it. Not a single stair. Your entire world runs up and down a second staircase. A tight stone spiral hidden inside the thickness of the walls, worn into shallow scoops by 2 centuries of boots, lit by borrowed light, smelling of tallow and damp and yesterday's dinners. The family calls it the back stairs. You call it the stairs, because for you there are no others, and the staircases are only the beginning. This house is honeycombed like a ship. There are service corridors running behind the staterooms, narrow as a pantry shelf, so that a maid with a coal scuttle can travel the length of the house and never once cross a carpet. There are doors in the panelling of the dining room that guests take for cupboards, and jib doors papered to match the walls so exactly that from 3 feet away there is no door at all, only wall, until it opens and a footman steps out of the wallpaper with a tray of coffee like a conjuring trick. Between the 2 worlds hangs the most important door in the building, And it is not the oak front door with the lion knocker. It is a swinging door covered in green baize, felted wool thick as a saddle blanket, and its whole purpose is to swallow sound. Kitchen clatter, laughter, the cook's opinions, the smell of onions, the green door eats them all, so that upstairs stays as quiet as a painting, and downstairs can be as loud as a harbour. The rules that go with this geography were read to you by the housekeeper on your first morning, from a printed card, the way a magistrate reads a sentence. You do not use the front stairs. You do not speak to a member of the family unless spoken to. And then you answer briefly, plainly, and with the room's title, "My lady," "My lord," and never a question of your own. If you are at work in a room and the family enters, you gather your things and you leave, quietly, at once. And if you meet one of them in a passage where there is no leaving, you stop, you step to the side, and you turn your face away toward the wall and stand quite still until they have passed, like a statue of a housemaid, so that they are spared the small awkwardness of your existence. The card did not phrase it that way. The card said, "Make yourself as invisible as possible. You have thought about that sentence every day since. Because here is the thing nobody upstairs seems to have noticed. The house has made you invisible, and then it has handed you its keys, its bedrooms, its letters, its cupboards, its conversations, and every secret it has. They have built a world where nobody looks at you, and the result is that you see absolutely everything. The kitchen before 6 in the morning is the engine room of a great ship, and the engine is a 14-year-old girl. Betsy has been up since 5. And by the time you pass through, the range, that great black iron cliff that runs the length of one wall, is already lit and beginning its long morning roar. Lighting it is not a matter of a match. The range must be raked of yesterday's ash, its flues opened in the correct order, its firebox coaxed from paper to kindling to coal, its dampers adjusted like the stops of an organ, and the whole black acreage of it will later need black leading until it shines like a beetle, which is also Betsy's job, and which is why Betsy's hands at 14 look like a gardener's. She does all this while singing, very quietly, the same 3 hymns in rotation. Not from piety, she has told you, but because the range likes them, and a range that likes you boils faster. The first kettle goes on before the birds are properly at it. Because everything that happens in the next 2 hours runs on hot water. Tea for the upper servants, shaving water for his lordship, cans and cans of washing water for bedrooms, and the first great urn for the servants' hall. The copper kettles line up along the range like a bronze band waiting to play. Betsy moves between them with a cloth in each hand, opens the firebox, feeds it, closes it, tastes nothing, owns nothing, and is, at this hour, the single most important person in a house that contains an earl. Presiding over all of this from a cushioned chair by the chimney corner, doing absolutely nothing, is Nelson. Nelson is the kitchen cat, a vast marmalade gentleman with one ear folded from an ancient war, employed, in theory, as a mouser. Nelson has not caught a mouse in the years anyone can count. He watches Betsy work with the calm of a retired admiral reviewing a fleet, accepts a rind of bacon as his due, and sleeps 18 hours a day in the exact centre of whichever surface is most needed. Mrs. Buckle, the cook, who has opinions on everything else in creation, will not hear a word against him. Every kitchen needs a cat, she says, and the mice, it must be admitted, stay away, possibly out of respect. Nelson, you have come to understand, holds the position every servant secretly dreams of. Board, lodging, warmth, universal affection, and no duties whatsoever. He is not staff. He is gentry who happen to live downstairs. Nobody living remembers hiring him. He walked in out of a January 11 years ago, sat down in front of the range as one resuming a seat briefly vacated, and was given cream by a kitchen maid long since married away, and that, in the eyes of custom, which is the only law that matters down here, settled the appointment permanently. There is a lesson in Nelson somewhere about the whole art of service, Ellen says. But nobody has ever stayed awake long enough in front of a fire to work out what it is. At 6, the cook herself arrives like a change in the weather, tying her apron strings with the finality of a general buckling, a sword belt, and the kitchen shifts from overture to first act. But you are not kitchen staff, so you take your candle and your housemaid's box and you climb back up through the sleeping house. Because your work happens now. In the dark. In the silence. In the 2 magic hours before the family wakes. When the whole downstairs world flows up through the hidden corridors and puts the visible world right. The housemaid's box is a wooden tray with a handle, and it is your entire profession in portable form. Black, lead, and brushes for the grates, emery paper, leathers, cloths, a stub of candle, matches. You and Ruth and Ellen, the head housemaid, spread out across the ground floor like a very quiet weather system. The shutters come first, folded back from tall windows so the grey morning can get in, and then, room by room, the fires. Kneel at the grate, spread the cloth, rake out yesterday's ash into the pail, sift the cinders worth keeping, sweep the hearth. Then the black lead, brushed onto the cold iron and polished until the whole grate gleams like wet slate. And then the new fire built above it, paper, kindling crossed just so, coals balanced into a small architecture that will catch from a single match when the moment comes. Ellen can lay a fire in 4 minutes. You are at 7 and improving. There are perhaps 30 fires in this house in winter, and every single one of them believes itself self-cleaning, because no member of the family has ever once seen it done. Then the carpets. And here is one of the small secret sciences of your trade. You do not simply sweep a great carpet, because sweeping raises a fog of dust that settles straight back down like snow, deciding it liked the ground after all. Instead, you go down to the kitchen for yesterday's used tea leaves, kept damp in a bucket by Betsy, who saves them for you the way one tradesman saves offcuts for another, and you scatter the wet leaves in handfuls across the turkey carpet, and then you sweep leaves, dust and all into the pan, and the leaves hold the dust down and take it with them, and behind your brush the colours of the carpet come up bright as a garden after rain. Tea, in this house, works 2 shifts. First it wakes the family, then it cleans their floors. Nothing in a Victorian house is used once. Nothing in a Victorian house is really finished until it has been used 3 times and then sold. Dusting, next, of everything, because a coal-fired, oil-lit house produces dust the way a dog produces hair, constantly, invisibly, from everywhere at once. You dust the picture frames of ancestors who watch you with the fixed expressions of people who have never carried anything heavier than a grievance. You polish the looking glasses with vinegar and scrunched newspaper until your own reflection surprises you. You plump and smooth and straighten. You carry the ash pails down the hidden stairs, and somewhere above you the first floorboard creaks. The house stretching, the family surfacing, and the 2 magic hours are over. By the time her ladyship comes down at 9, every grate is blazing, every carpet is bright, every surface is clean, and there is not one single sign that any human hand was involved. The fairies did it. The fairies, whose knees ache, are now having their breakfast, and while your knees are aching, spare a moment of them for your cousin Alice, because whenever this life feels hard, and it will feel hard again by supper time, Alice is the measure the hall uses for the other kind of service, the kind you were spared. Alice is maid of all work to a solicitor's family in a villa on the edge of the market town, and maid of all work means exactly what it says. She is the cook, the housemaid, the parlour maid, the kitchen maid, the laundry help, and the boot boy, all of them alone £13 a year, in a household that keeps one servant, precisely because keeping one servant is what separates the solicitor's wife from the grocer's. Alice lights her range alone at 6, cooks alone, scrubs alone, answers the door in a snatched clean apron with her sleeves rolled down over wet arms, hauls her coal, hauls her water, and eats her dinner standing up in a kitchen with nobody in it, which is the part, she told you once, that gets into your bones, not the work. The quiet. The whole day long with nobody to laugh at, nobody to learn from, nobody to notice whether you sat down once between 6 and 10. At Ashcombe there are 30 of you. And the work is divided until it is merely enormous. At the villa there is Alice, and the work is indivisible. And her mistress, who keeps one servant and has read a great many household manuals about the management of them, follows her through the rooms running a gloved finger along the ledges. When the hall here grumbles, and the hall here grumbles the way rivers run, somebody will eventually say, in the settling tone, "Well, it is better than a villa," and every head at the table nods, including the heads that have never seen a villa, because the doctrine is sound. In service, the grander the house, the gentler the life. More hands, more order, more dinner, more company, more ladder. The hardest place in England is not under this roof with its 30 servants. It is in 10,000 small stucco houses with one girl each. Aged perhaps 15, alone with the range and the bells and the gloved finger, and nobody downstairs to tell her that everyone cries the first fortnight. You send Alice your old story papers when you write home, and Mrs. Buckle, who has never met her, sends a recipe sometimes, kitchen to kitchen. The Freemasonry of the profession reaching even into the villas, where it is needed most. But before breakfast, you should meet the machine that will run the rest of your day, because it hangs on the wall of the service passage outside the kitchen. And it is the nervous system of the entire house. It is the bell board. A long wooden case holding a row of bells on coiled springs, and under each bell a painted name. Drawing room, library, morning room, her ladyship, his lordship, blue room, nursery. From each bell, a wire runs away into the walls, up through the floors, around corners on little brass cranks, some of the wires travelling 60 feet or more, until they end at a brass pull or an embroidered ribbon in some distant beautiful room. One tug up there, and down here a bell leaps and shivers on its spring. You cannot read the bells by sound alone yet. Ellen can. Ellen can be elbow deep in a fireplace 2 rooms away, hear a single chime, and say, without turning her head, "Library." That will be his lordship wanting the fire seen to. Off you go. The bells ring on average, you would guess, 100 and sometimes a day. Each one is a small command. None of them ever says, "Please." It is the politest tyranny ever wired into a building, and you will spend the rest of your life able to hear a shop bell and feel your feet start moving on their own. And it was here, at the bell board, on your first morning, that this house quietly took your name. The housekeeper looked you over, checked her book, and said, "You will answer to Mary. Your name is Harriet." You said so, politely. She said, "That may be, but her ladyship keeps a Mary as third housemaid. She has always kept a Mary. The bells are answered by Mary, and it saves confusion all around." And that was the entire discussion. The footmen have the same arrangement. The first footman is always Thomas, and the second is always James, whatever their mothers decided. And the current Thomas was born a Walter, which you know because Betsy told you, downstairs being a place where everyone's real name is common knowledge and their working name is a kind of livery worn over it. Upstairs never learns this. Upstairs believes it has employed an unbroken 100-year dynasty of women called Mary, all apparently identical, all apparently ageless, which is, if you think about it, exactly the kind of secret this house prefers, not hidden, just never once looked at. So you are Mary now, from 5:30 to 11 at night. Harriet lives in the tin box under your bed with the ribbon and the letters and comes out on your afternoon off. Now, you might imagine that a house divided into masters and servants has one aristocracy in it. It has two, and the one below stairs is stricter. Upstairs, an earl can be easy and charming about rank, because rank has never once been in question for him. Downstairs, rank is measured to the inch and defended to the death. At the top of your world stand the upper servants, and the space between them and you is wider than the space between his lordship and the Queen. Mr. Godfrey, the butler, rules the men, the wine, the silver, and the dining room. Mrs. Hartley, the housekeeper, rules the women, the linen, the china, and the stores, and carries at her waist the great ring of keys that is her crown and sceptre in one. Miss Fanshawe, her ladyship's own maid, rules nothing officially and knows everything unofficially, and Mr. Prentice, his lordship's valet, is so quiet that people forget he is in the room, which, you are beginning to suspect, is the whole point of Mr. Prentice. These four are called, behind their backs and 2 counties in every direction, the pug's parlour, after the housekeeper's private sitting room where they take their pudding, because yes, even meals here are a ceremony of rank. When the servants' hall dines, the upper servants enter in procession, in order of precedence, and sit at the head of the long table, and the meat is carved and eaten with everyone together, and then, at a nod from Mr. Godfrey, the uppers rise as one and withdraw to Mrs. Hartley's room for their pudding and their private conversation. And the moment the door closes, the hall exhales, elbows appear on the table, and the real news of the day begins. The withdrawal even has a name. It is called the remove, as if pudding were a state occasion, which, in this house, it is. Below the uppers, everyone has a station and everyone knows it. Ellen, as head housemaid, outranks Ruth, who outranks you. Thomas, as first footman, outranks James, and both of them consider themselves a full flight of stairs above Davy, the hall boy, who is 13 and outranks nobody except, in theory, the boot scraper. Betsy, dear Betsy, who runs the engine of the entire morning, stands at the very bottom of the female ladder, which tells you everything you need to know about how ladders are built. And should the family entertain, the arithmetic gets grander still, because visiting servants take their employer's rank. When a duke comes to shoot, the duke's valet enters the servants' hall ahead of Mr. Godfrey's own men, sits at Mrs. Hartley's right hand, and is addressed by the courtesy title of his master's house, so that for one strange, glittering week, the hall contains a man whom everyone gravely calls Chatsworth. Nelson, it should be recorded, observes none of this. Nelson sits where he likes, including, once, on the visiting valet, and was not corrected. There are, as I said, 2 aristocracies in this house, and then, above both of them, there is the cat. Breakfast in the servants' hall is at 8, after 3 hours of work, and it arrives with the force of a small liberation. The hall is a long, low room with a scrubbed table down the middle, benches for the lower servants, chairs at the head for the uppers, a dresser of blue and white crockery, and on the wall, in a black frame, a printed list of household rules that nobody has actually read in a generation, but everybody can recite anyway, because the rules are in the air of the place. There is porridge, there is a mountain range of bread, there is dripping to spread on it, which is the savoury fat saved from every roast, and is, you privately hold, better than butter, though you would deny this under oath. There is bacon, on good days, and there is beer, small beer, brewed weak for exactly this table, or for the modern-minded beer money instead, a shilling or 2 extra in the quarter, and the debates between the beer faction and the money faction are conducted with the seriousness of a parliamentary session. The talk at breakfast follows the same rule as the seating. Rank speaks downward, gossip travels upward, and both pretend the other is not happening. At the head, Mr. Godfrey exchanges observations with Mrs. Hartley about the weather and the wine merchant in the tone of 2 ambassadors. At your end, the news is realer. Whose feet hurt, whose follower was seen at church, whether the new grocer's boy is handsome, a question on which Ruth has strong findings. And down the middle of the table, folded and waiting, yesterday's newspaper makes its stately way from rank to rank, because the paper comes downstairs when upstairs has finished with it, and by the time it reaches you the news is 2 days old, which suits you fine. The tragedies have softened by then. The scandals, however, have not, because the scandals you already knew about before the paper did. The paper, in this house, is not where news arrives. It is where news goes to be confirmed. And this morning, as most mornings, breakfast ends with the sight of Mr. Pointing, Godfrey rising, brushing an invisible crumb from his black waistcoat, and processing away toward his pantry. And if you carry the tea things past his door a minute later, you can see him at his true religion. The butler's pantry is a small room lined with shelves, and it glitters. Silver in ranks. The great candelabra like leafless silver trees, the sauce boats, the salvers, the entree dishes, the punch bowl the size of a font, and the flatware, dozens upon dozens of forks and spoons, every piece engraved with the family crest, every piece counted, every piece known to Mr. Godfrey personally, the way a shepherd knows sheep. He cleans it with plate powder, a soft red rouge, worked with fingers and leather until the metal goes from grey to white to a kind of liquid light. He does this himself. Footmen may do the everyday pieces, but the great pieces are his. And while he works, his guard drops half an inch, and he will sometimes tell you things, that this punch bowl went to a coronation, that a previous earl pawned the candelabra twice, quietly, in a bad decade, and bought them back both times, and that a butler who cannot read his silver like a ledger of the family's true fortunes has not been paying attention. Which brings us to the safe, and to the pistol, and to one of the strangest secrets of the trade. The best silver, the real treasure, lives in a plate safe, an iron room within a room, and the safe lives next to the butler's own bedroom. And this is not an accident of architecture. It is the design of the entire profession. All over England, in every great house, the butler sleeps beside the silver, on purpose, as the last line of defence against burglars, and Mr. Godfrey keeps, in a drawer by his bed, a pistol of a vintage that would interest a museum more than a criminal. He has never fired it. His predecessor never fired it. It is possible, Davy whispers, that it cannot be fired, that it exists the way the lion knocker on the front door exists, as a statement rather than a tool. But every night at 11, when Mr. Godfrey makes his rounds and turns his keys, he does it in the knowledge that if the worst comes through a window at 3 a.m, the family's fortune stands behind one door, one elderly firearm, and one extremely dignified man in a nightshirt. He considers this arrangement entirely proper. So, somehow, do you, if Mr. Godfrey is the king below stairs, Mrs. Hartley is the government. She is somewhere between 50 and eternity, wears black silk that rustles like dry leaves, so that you always hear the law approaching, and carries the keys. You must understand about the keys. On the ring at her waist hang the keys to the linen room, the china closet, the storeroom, the still room, the tea caddy, the sugar, the candles, the soap, and the good preserves, which is to say, the keys to everything in this house worth having. And she carries them all day and sleeps with them on her nightstand. And when she walks the passages, the whole ring chimes softly with every step, a sound the entire staff can identify at 40 feet through a closed door, which is, of course, exactly why she has never had them oiled. Twice a day the stores are given out, and given is a strong word. Betsy presents herself with her list. And Mrs. Hartley unlocks the storeroom and weighs out flour, sugar, tea, candles and soap by the ounce, in a ledger, in ink, the way a bank pays out sovereigns. Tea lives in a locked wooden caddy. Sugar lives behind lock and key. And here is the quiet insult built into the furniture of every great house in England. Those locks are not there against burglars. Burglars do not come for the sugar. The locks are there against you, against all of you, a suspicion in solid brass, screwed to the household's most ordinary comforts, and everyone lives with it politely, the way you live with weather. Mrs. Hartley does not remark on it. She simply weighs, enters, locks, and moves on, the way governments do. But her true kingdom, and the place where she becomes almost human, is the still room. A small, warm chapel of shelves off the kitchen passage where the house's alchemy happens. Here are the preserves in their ranked jars, the bottled plums like specimens, the quince jelly, the colour of a church window, the lavender water, the rose water, the beeswax and turpentine polish made to a formula older than anyone present, and the remedies. The ginger for wind, the blackcurrant for throats, the bottle marked for coughs that is mostly, everyone knows, brandy. All of it is made to receipts in a thick handwritten book that Mrs. Hartley keeps in the still room table drawer, a book begun by a housekeeper 4 housekeepers ago, annotated in 5 different hands across 60 years. And if this house has a Bible, that is it. She has begun lately to let you hold things while she works, which Ellen says is the closest Mrs. Hartley comes to affection. And you are ashamed of how much it pleases you. At 10 minutes to 9, before the family eats, comes the one moment of the day when the 2 houses stand in the same room on purpose, and it is worth watching closely, because everything this world believes about itself is in it. Household prayers. The bell is rung, and the entire indoor staff files into the dining room in strict order of rank. Mr. Godfrey leading like a flagship, Betsy and Davy bringing up the rear with their hands scrubbed for the occasion, and the household arranges itself standing along the sideboard wall while the family sits, and his lordship, at the head of his table with the book open before him, reads the morning's passage in the voice he otherwise reserves for the drainage question, and then everyone, both nations together, kneels, the family on the carpet, the staff on the boards, and one prayer goes up from the whole house at once, 6 minutes, beginning to end. Then the staff rises, files out in reverse order, and the green door swallows us, and the family sits down to the eggs we cooked while we go back to being invisible until wanted. You may make of the theology what you like, and the hall privately makes several things of it. Mrs. Buckle holding that the Almighty has never once helped her with a dinner for 12, but that the kneeling rests her back. But do not miss what the ceremony actually is, because Mrs. Hartley, who misses nothing, has never once let a new maid skip it. It is the one time in every day when the family must look at us, all of us, assembled, named in heaven, if nowhere else, and count. His lordship reads to 30 faces every morning. He could not put 6 names to them, but he must see them, morning after morning, year after year, the whole silent nation that holds up his floor, and the hall files in with its chin level and its collar clean and lets itself be seen. Prayers, Ellen said to you in your first week, is where they remember we have souls, and the rest of the day is where they forget, and you have never heard the entire 19th century summarized more efficiently, before 9 in the morning, by a woman holding a duster. At 9 the gong sounds and the family sits down to its breakfast, and you get your first proper look of the day at the people whose lives you run. Serving at breakfast is Thomas and James's stage, but a housemaid is in and out with hot water and toast racks, and so you stand for whole minutes at the sideboard, present and unseen, while the family talks exactly as if the room were empty. This is the strangest thing about your position, and 5 weeks in, it still astonishes you. They do not lower their voices. Why would they? You are furniture. You are a useful cupboard that walks. And so, over the silver dishes of eggs and devilled kidneys, the house hands you its news for the day, free of charge. This morning's edition, His lordship has the drainage plans out beside his plate again, because the Earl of Alderton, master of 12,000 acres and a seat in the House of Lords, has exactly one consuming passion in this life, and it is field drainage. He is on his third scheme for the Western Meadows, and speaks of clay pipes, the way other men speak of racehorses. Her ladyship answers in the tone of a woman who has been hearing about clay pipes since the honeymoon, while sorting her letters into 3 piles which you have learned to read at a distance: invitations, tradesmen, and family. And it is a family letter this morning that makes her go still for a moment, and then fold it into her pocket, unread beyond the first lines, to be finished in private. Lady Georgiana, who is 18 and comes out next season, pushes her egg around its cup and asks, with a carelessness so rehearsed you could applaud it, whether the post has come, and when the answer is that it has, and there is nothing for her, something in her face closes like a door, and Master Freddy, aged 9, slips a sausage into his napkin with the smoothness of a professional. For the dog, he believes secretly, though the entire staff knows the sausage is actually for Betsy, who trades him jam for them at the kitchen door, a black market conducted entirely in winks. You clear the toast rack, nobody sees you do it. By 9:30, you know more about this family's morning than any one of them knows about it themselves, and the day has barely started. Master Freddy, sausage secured, is retrieved from the breakfast table at 9:30 and returned to the 3rd floor. And the 3rd floor is worth a visit, because it is a country all its own, and it belongs to neither of the 2 houses you have learned so far. The nursery wing is the strangest arrangement in this entire strange building. A suite of bright rooms at the top of the grand staircase where the family's own children are raised, from their first day, not by the family, but by us. By Nurse, to be exact, who ruled Lady Georgiana's whole childhood and rules Freddy's now. A broad, calm fortress of a woman who has brought up 11 children for 3 families and buried 2 of her own, and who is the only servant in this house, the only one who gives orders to the Countess, gives them gently, in the form of suggestions about draughts and puddings and bedtimes, but gives them, and has them obeyed, because on the 3rd floor her word is law and everyone, including the law of the rest of the house, knows it. Freddy's day runs on nursery time, which touches family time twice. The after-breakfast visit and the 6 o'clock hour when he is scrubbed, brushed, buttoned into his sailor suit and presented to his parents in the drawing room like a small formal delegation from a friendly power. The other 22 hours belong to Nurse and to Jane, the nursery maid, who carries the nursery coal, cooks the nursery meals on the nursery grate, and eats apart from the hall more days than not, the 3rd floor being its own sealed ship even below stairs. It gives the children something you have thought about often since you came here. They are aristocrats, raised by the working class. Freddy's first words were in Nurse's accent. His prayers are the ones her mother taught her. When he is hurt, he runs past his own mother's door, up 2 flights, to the nursery, at full speed, and someday he will be sent away to school and come back tall, and learn to walk past all of us with the smooth blindness of his father, because that too is part of the education. But not yet. At present he is 9, and this morning he paid Betsy 2 sausages for a saucer of jam, and Nurse pretends not to know, and the Countess pretends not to know that Nurse pretends, and up on the 3rd floor, as everywhere else in this house, love finds its way through the rules like water through a wall. As for Lady Georgiana, her old nurse, the one before this one, lives now in the South Lodge with a pension and a garden, and every Thursday afternoon, rain or fine, Georgiana walks the half-mile down the drive and takes tea with her. Alone, no maid, no mother, and walks back an hour later looking unwound. The hall approves of this so thoroughly, it is never even discussed. Whatever is currently wrong on the 1st floor, and the burned letter says something is, It is understood that the person Lady Georgiana will eventually tell is not in the family and not in the drawing room. She is in the lodge with the kettle on. Ask anyone below the green door. The family's children are ours first. The family gets them afterward, and even then, never entirely. Late morning also brings the callers, and with them the most elegant lie in the entire English language, administered daily by us. When the wheels of a visiting carriage sound on the drive, Thomas has the front door open before the bell can be touched, and the visiting lady asks whether her ladyship is at home, and here is the secret hiding in that sentence. At home does not mean at home. It is code, and everyone on both sides of the door knows it. Her ladyship may be 20 feet away in the morning room, in plain hearing, entirely visible in the hall mirror, if anyone were vulgar enough to look, and Thomas will say, with a face like a closed cathedral, that her ladyship is not at home, and the visiting lady will say, of course, and leave her card with its corner turned, and depart perfectly satisfied, having heard not a lie, but a verdict. Not at home, madam, to you. The card goes on to the silver salver. The salver goes in to her ladyship, who is somehow home again the moment the door shuts, and she reads the little pasteboard rectangle the way betting men read racing papers, because the cards are the score sheet of the county's whole silent tournament. Who called? Who called first? Who has not called? Whose corner was turned, and whose was not? And the entire system, the fictions, the verdicts, the small daily accepted untruths of polite England, rests on one professional foundation. A footman's face that gives nothing away, at any door, to anyone. They are not at home, Thomas says, and the whole shire agrees to believe him, and that, as much as the silver on his salver, is what the extra inches are paid for. And then there is Miss Fanshawe. Her ladyship's own maid deserves a chapter to herself, because she is the most instructive person in the house on the subject of secrets, being made almost entirely out of them. Downstairs she is called Miss Fanshawe to her face and Mademoiselle behind her back, because when she applied for her first place as a lady's maid 20 years ago, she understood the market. A French maid commands higher wages, French being to hairdressing what Italian is to opera. So Fanny Shaw of Peckham became Mademoiselle Fanchette, acquired an accent the way one acquires a jacket, and wore it for 2 entire years in her first situation before the household discovered, from a visiting cousin, that Mademoiselle's French consisted of 11 words and a shrug. By then her hairdressing had made her indispensable, which tells you the second lesson. Skill forgives everything. She has long since dropped the accent, but she has kept the shrug, and on the subject of her years as a Frenchwoman she will say only, in the flattest Peckham voice imaginable, that it was a different time. Her position is the strangest in the house. She belongs to neither world and stands at the door of both. She dresses the Countess, brushes her hair 100 strokes at night, mends her lace, guards her jewel case, reads her moods the way Betsy reads the range, and hears, across a year of quiet evenings at the Mirror, very nearly everything her ladyship thinks. She carries messages sealed and unsealed. She knows which letters are locked in the little drawer of the dressing table, and it would be an insult to her profession to pretend she has never held one up to the light. In the servants' hall this makes her feared, because a word from Miss Fanshawe travels upward with a speed no other word in the house can match. And there is one more thing, the perk that crowns her position, the cast-offs. By custom old as the profession, her ladyship's gowns, once worn enough or fashionable no longer, pass to her maid, and a countess's gown, barely 2 seasons old, is worth more than a housemaid earns in a quarter. Some she keeps, altered. Most she sells, through a discreet dealer in the county town who asks no questions and pays in coin. And this is perfectly ordinary, perfectly understood, and never once mentioned in either world. Miss Fanshawe, Ellen reckons, has more saved than Mr. Godfrey. Nobody knows what she is saving for. That too, she keeps the way she keeps everything, beautifully. Mid-morning belongs to the deep cleaning, and the deep cleaning belongs to a body of knowledge that nobody upstairs suspects exists. They think housework is effort. It is not. It is chemistry, and you are 5 weeks into your apprenticeship in it. The tea leaves on the carpets you know about. But consider the wallpaper, which cannot be washed, water being fatal to it, and which nevertheless collects a year of coal smoke film like everything else. The answer is bread. A quartern loaf, 2 days stale, cut into fat pieces, and you rub the wall down with the cut face of the bread in long, even strokes, and the crumb lifts the grime clean off the paper, and you work through a loaf, a room, and the walls come up like morning, wine on linen, salt, at once, a white hill of it, and the salt drinks the stain out of the fibres before it can settle in for life. Glass and mirrors, vinegar, and newspaper scrunched to a soft ball, nothing else, and no maid in England was ever taught why it works, only that it does, and that is the general spirit of the science. Grease on oak, hot flat iron over brown paper, and the paper drinks the grease up out of the wood, like a thirsty man. Ink, lemon, and salt, and prayer. Smoked ceilings, whiting. Flies, quassia water in saucers. Moths, camphor, and terror. Ellen carries all of this in her head the way Mr. Godfrey carries the silver, and she dispenses it in the weary voice of a professor who cannot believe the university keeps sending her first years. But there is a second layer to the science, and this is the part that is truly secret. The tricks are not only for cleaning, they are for cleaning invisibly, at speed, in the servant of all arts, which is the art of never being caught working. You clean a room in the order of its escape routes. You learn the map of creaking boards outside every door the way a sailor learns rocks. You carry a duster always, because a maid moving with a duster is working, and a maid moving without one is wandering, and wandering is a sin. And when a bell rings and a room must be entered where the family sits, you enter on the balls of your feet with your eyes lowered, do the single thing required, and withdraw, and the whole visit should disturb the air of the room. Ellen says, no more than the closing of a book. There is one more piece of housemaid lore to learn before we count your money, and it is sewn rather than swept. Late morning, in the corner of the servants' hall, stands the work-basket. And the work-basket is never empty, because a house of this size shreds cloth the way it produces dust. Sheets go thin in the middle and are turned sides to middle to live a second life. Stockings are darned over the wooden mushroom until the darns have darns. Thomas's livery loses buttons at a rate the hall considers scientific. Aprons fray, dusters are hemmed from the retired shirts of his lordship, and all of it lands in the basket, and the basket lands on whichever maid has 10 minutes standing still. Which is why no housemaid in England sits with idle hands, ever, anywhere, and why you can now darn in the dark, by feel, while holding a conversation, a skill your granddaughters will not inherit and will never miss. And it is at the work-basket, sewing, that new girls are taught the rest of the code, the parts too fine for the printed card, that you wear the print dress in the morning, for the dirty work, and change into the black dress, clean apron, and good cap at 3, so that the afternoon house is served by a smarter, quieter, altogether more fictional class of maid than the one who blacked its grates. That in some houses, and you should be grateful this is not one, the rules on the card have prices on them. 6pence fined for lateness at prayers, a shilling for a follower at the door, 2pence for a candle left burning, the wages bleeding back into the house through a tariff of small sins. Ashcombe does not fine. Mrs. Hartley considers fining common, which is the strongest word in her entire vocabulary. Her system is older and cheaper. She looks at you, one look over the spectacles, held 1 second longer than comfortable, and the crime, whatever it was, dies out in that generation. The hall has a name for the look. The hall calls it the frost. Betsy claims it once stopped a dog mid-bark. And while the story is unverified, no one who has received the frost has ever called it exaggerated. Let us talk honestly about money, since nobody else in this house will. You are paid £16 a year. Not a month. A year. Say it plainly like that and it sounds like nothing, and there are footmen in London who would say so to your face. But now do the arithmetic the way your mother did at the kitchen table when the letter came offering you the place. Out of those £16 you pay for nothing but your own clothes and your stamps. Your bed, your board, your candles, your washing, your beer if you take it. All found. Meat twice a day. In a country where whole families see meat twice a week. A doctor, if you are ill, at his lordship's expense, mostly, if the illness is honest. Your brother Albert, who is a farm labourer and proud, earns perhaps 13 shillings a week, call it £34 a year, and out of it pays rent, bread, boots, coal, and everything else a family of 5 devours. And in February, when the frost stops the fieldwork, he earns nothing at all. You earn less and keep more. Service is the great confidence trick of the age, and the trick is that it is played in both directions at once. Above you the ladder climbs. Ruth has £18, Ellen 24. Miss Fanshawe is spoken of, in the reverent tones reserved for weather disasters and large sums, as a £30 woman. Mrs. Buckle rules at 50, Mrs. Hartley at somewhere nobody dares guess, and Mr. Godfrey at 80, plus considerations we shall come to, which lift him, Davy swears, past 100, richer than the village schoolmaster and the curate put together. Thomas earns 28. And here we arrive at one of the profession's more magnificent absurdities, because a footman's wage is openly tied to his inches. Thomas is 6'1", and 6 feet commands a premium, the way a hunter with good bloodlines commands one, matched pairs of tall footmen being a thing great houses collect and display, exactly like the candelabra. James is 5'11", and has never forgiven the inch. On top of wages come the veils, the tips, and they are not small. When a house party leaves, the guests come down the steps through a corridor of assembled staff, and coins pass from gloved hands with a discretion that would credit a conjurer, and a good shooting week can put 5 shillings in your apron pocket, which is why the hall greets the news of certain open-handed gentlemen the way farmers greet rain. And what do you do with it, this fortune of yours, paid 4 times a year on quarter day and coins counted twice? You walk it to the village on your afternoon off, to the post office, where a clerk who knows every servant in the parish enters it in your post office savings bank book. Government safe, 2.5%, and hands the book back. And you carry it home in your glove. Your book stands at £11, 4 shillings. You know the figure the way Thomas knows his inches. Every servant in this house has a book, and every book is a door. Betsy's opens onto a dressmaking apprenticeship for her little sister. Ellen's onto a marriage we are not yet permitted to discuss, Mr. Godfrey's, they say, onto a public house with his name over the door. Gold on green. £16 a year sounds like servitude. It is, but it is servitude with compound interest. And on the far side of it, if your knees and your character hold, there is a door with your own name on it, which brings us, delicately, to the other economy, because wages are only the visible income of a great house, and beneath them, tolerated, traditional, and never once written down, runs the grey market of the perquisites. Every position carries its perks, ancient as the position itself. The cook owns the dripping. Every roast in this house sheds its fat. The fat is potted, and once a week a dealer's cart comes to the kitchen yard and buys it, along with the bones and the rabbit skins, and the coins go into Mrs. Buckle's apron, and no ledger on earth. The used tea leaves, once they have cleaned your carpets, are dried and sold again at the door to women from the village, who will brew them a third time. And if you are ever tempted to pity anyone, pity the person drinking third-boiled tea. The candle ends belong to the footmen, wax being worth money, and a house that burns 4 dozen candles at a dinner party sheds stubs like a pine sheds needles, and Thomas collects them in a box under his bed, with the devotion of a man collecting rent. Miss Fanshawe has her gowns. Mr. Prentice has his lordship's barely worn shirts and hats, a gentleman's wardrobe being expected to turn over whether the gentleman notices or not. And Mr. Godfrey has the noblest perk of all, the ends of the wine, the bottles too far gone for the dining room and entirely fine for the pantry, plus the ancient right to the corks, which sounds like nothing until you learn there is a man in the county town who buys corks by the sack. And then, one step further into the shadows, there is the commission. Every tradesman who supplies this house, the grocer, the fishmonger, the coal merchant, pays his respects to the kitchen at Christmas, and some of them, it is universally known and never said, pay a little steadier than that. A quiet percentage to the cook, who keeps the custom coming their way. This is the true source of the great feud between Mrs. Buckle and Mr. Skinner the fishmonger, which the hall discusses as theatre, but which is, at bottom, a trade dispute. Skinner, Betsy whispers, grew forgetful about the compliments of the season and has spent 2 years paying for it in returned turbot. Is all this stealing? The question is genuinely interesting, and the house has settled it with a very Victorian precision. The dripping, the leaves, the stubs, the gowns, the corks. Custom, sanctioned by time, blessed by silence. But let a housemaid take 1 lump of sugar from the locked caddy. 1, and she is gone by nightfall without a character. The line is not between honesty and theft. The line is between the perks of your station and the perks of somebody else's. And everyone on both sides of the green door knows exactly where it runs, the way everyone knows the map of the creaking boards. Before the hall sits down to its dinner, walk out once across the kitchen yard, because the food that rules this house does not come from any shop, and the empire that produces it is a secret in plain sight all its own. Behind the stable block, sunk into the slope like a buried igloo, waits the ice house, a brick egg underground, packed each February with blocks sawn from the frozen lake by estate men with red hands and long saws, stacked in straw, sealed behind 3 doors, and drawn on all year, so that in August, in a heat that wilts the roses, her ladyship's guests take iced pudding, and the ice in it fell as rain on this park 2 winters ago. Beside the game larder, cool and screened and gently horrifying, hang the pheasants and partridges in their feathers, aging toward the table on a timetable Mrs. Buckle inspects daily, pinching thoughtfully, like a woman choosing wool. The dairy stands apart, whitewashed and cold and scrubbed to surgery, where the dairymaid turns the great shallow pans of morning milk and works the butter against marble, stamping each pound with the family crest, because in this world even the butter has a coat of arms. And then there is the walled garden. And the walled garden is the estate's cathedral. 4 acres inside brick walls 12 feet high, the walls themselves actually heated, with flues running inside the brickwork so that peaches ripen against them in an English May, and glasshouse after glasshouse down the south side, the vinery with its black grapes hanging like chandeliers, the peach house, the melon pit, and the pinery, where, in the reign of the head gardener Mr. Airlie, pineapples, actual pineapples, are grown in beds of fermenting bark, each fruit the product of 2 years' labour and roughly the cost of a housemaid's quarter, so that when a pineapple goes up the table at a dinner party, it is not dessert, it is a flag being planted, Mr. Airlie commands 12 men and answers, in his own opinion, to God and the seasons only. The kitchen and the garden conduct their business like two sovereign nations, through formal notes and occasional wars, and when Mrs. Buckle sends back asparagus as wanting, the ensuing correspondence, Betsy says, is better than the story papers. None of this splendour is for eating, you understand, or not mainly, it is for saying something. The hothouse grapes at the bishop's elbow tonight say what the candelabra say, what Thomas's inches say, what the crested butter says, that this house commands not just money but sunshine, seasons, winter itself, bottled, buried, trained against warm brick, and served, by you, with the correct spoon. The servants dine at midday, at 1 o'clock, on the substantial logic that you cannot run a house on an empty staff, and dinner in the hall is the biggest meal of your day. A joint, potatoes, greens from the kitchen garden, and on Thursdays a suet pudding that sits in you until Saturday. The uppers process in, Grace is said. Mr. Godfrey carves like a surgeon with tenure, and for 20 minutes the two aristocracies eat together in a formality that would not disgrace the dining room above. Then comes the remove. The uppers withdraw to their pudding, the door of Mrs. Hartley's room clicks shut, and the servants' hall becomes, for half an hour, the best informed room in the county. Because here is a thing the family upstairs has never fully understood, and it is perhaps the biggest secret in this entire house. The servants know everything. Not most things. Everything. The network that delivers it has no name, no office, and no wires, and it outperforms the telegraph on every measure but distance. Consider how it works. Every letter in this house is carried by a servant, every visitor announced by one, every conversation at every meal conducted in front of one. The laundry tells the laundry maids what the doctors have not yet been told. The tradesmen's books tell the kitchen which great families are quietly not paying them. And when the family dines out, or a house party gathers, the visiting valets and ladies' maids sit down to their own supper in some other servants' hall, and there the accounts are exchanged, house for house, with the courtesy of central banks settling at the end of the day. It was known in this hall that the Milbanke engagement was off 9 days before it was known in the Milbank drawing-room. It was known here that a certain baronet's stables were mortgaged before his own agent knew. The word having travelled from his coachman to a groom to our stable boy to Betsy, which is 4 stops, and the news arrived, as Ellen observed at the time, fresher than the fish. What is done with all this knowledge? And here is the strange, almost beautiful answer. Mostly nothing. It is not sold except by the rare bad servant, and it is not, in a decent hall, even used. It is simply held, the way a bank holds money, as the wealth and the dignity of the profession. Upstairs holds the land, the silver, and the votes. Downstairs holds the information, every scrap of it, and the quiet knowledge of holding it is a kind of pay. The family lives inside a glass case and has furnished the case with people and convinced itself the people cannot see. The people see. The people discuss it over suet pudding, and then the people go back to work, carrying the family's entire private life in their heads with the same care they carry the soup, spilling neither, because both, professionally speaking, are theirs. There is one more table this kitchen feeds, and it never sits down in the hall. Through every afternoon of the year, the back door does a quiet trade the front door knows nothing about, because a great house sheds food the way it sheds candle ends, and the shedding has its own ancient law. The broken victuals, the ends of joints, the bread past its best, the pastry that came down untouched because the sharp-faced ladies of this world are always banting. All of it is gathered by Mrs. Buckle into a marble-shelved corner of the larder, and given out, at the kitchen door, to a congregation the village sends up in 1s and 2s. The widow Twill with her basket and her blessings, the laid-off ditcher's wife who comes the long way so as not to be seen coming, the children from the cottages at the ford who appear on baking day with the reliability of starlings. Nobody upstairs ordered this. Nobody upstairs would forbid it either. Charity being among the duties of a great name, but the daily practice of it, the who and the how, much and the sparing of feelings, is entirely a below-stairs government, run by the cook, audited by nobody, and conducted with a rough kindness that would astonish the people who only ever see Mrs. Buckle addressing a fishmonger. And then there are the travellers. A house this size stands on the tramping map of England, passed mouth to mouth along the roads, and the men come up the back lane in 2s and 3s a week, soldiers old and pretend, harvest men between harvests, walkers whose stories have worn as thin as their boots, and the law of the door is older than anyone serving in it. Nobody is turned away empty, and nobody is let in. Bread and cheese and beer at the step, a mended fence nail or an hour of wood splitting accepted in trade if the man has his pride on. And Mrs. Hartley's standing rule, delivered to every new kitchen maid on her first day. You feed the man, you mind the dog, and you never ever let the road know what the house holds. The road, it is understood, has eyes, and a kitchen door that shows too much plenty will be visited, some moonless February night, by callers of another kind entirely, which is one more reason Mr. Godfrey sleeps where he sleeps. So the charity of Ashcombe is real, and daily, and warm, and wears, like everything else in this world, a locked face over its open hand. You have begun taking your turn at the door, and Betsy is teaching you the regulars. Who gets the good cheese, who gets talked to, who gets watched all the way back down the lane. It is the strangest lesson of your 5 weeks, and the truest. Even the kindness here runs on rank, rules, and intelligence, and even so, nobody has gone hungry off this step in living memory. After dinner, in the slack half-hour before the afternoon's work, comes the hour of the other great secret, the warm and dangerous one. And to see it, you have only to watch Ellen, who at 2:20 develops an errand in the kitchen yard with the regularity of a railway timetable. The rule is printed on the card in the hall, and it is the rule every servant in England lives under, no followers. A follower is a sweetheart, and the household forbids them on the reasoning, never quite spoken, that a maid's affection is a leak in the vessel, that where a follower goes, cold mutton and confidences follow him out the scullery door, and that a young woman's entire loyalty has been bought with the £16 and the attic bed. So love, forbidden, does what love forbidden always does. It learns the timetables. Ellen's follower is Constable Hobbs, the village policeman, a large, slow, deeply respectable young man whose beat takes him, by an astonishing coincidence, past the kitchen yard gate at 2:20 on Tuesdays and Fridays, where he pauses to examine the hinges for crime. Ellen brings the peelings out to the pig bucket at that exact hour, and for 4 minutes they stand on opposite sides of the gate, he in the lane, she in the yard, discussing, to any observer, the weather, while the entire lower staff observes them from the scullery window, with the tenderness of a theatre audience, and Mrs. Buckle turns the kitchen clock a shade, so as not to see. Everyone knows. Nobody knows officially. Should Mrs. Hartley round the corner, Hobbs will find a hinge of consuming interest, and Ellen will discover urgent business with the pig bucket, and the law and the housemaid will part like strangers, hearts hammering, until Friday. They are saving, both of them, his book and hers, quietly growing toward each other. When they marry, and the hall is certain it is when, Ellen will leave service the same week, because a married housemaid is a thing this world does not employ, and the house will lose the best pair of hands in it, and the rule that caused the whole conspiracy will have taught the household precisely nothing, though it must be said, when the conspiracy ends well, this house knows how to end it. 2 summers ago, before your time but told to you so often you can see it, the third housemaid then, a Welsh girl called Gwen, who answered to Mary as you do, married the wheelwright's son, and because she had served 6 years and served them well, the hall gave the wedding. Understand what that means. The banns read in the church where the household sits. The breakfast laid in the servants' hall on the good crockery. A cake by Mrs. Buckle that is still discussed in the voice reserved for state occasions, the Countess sending down a length of silk for the dress and, on the morning itself, receiving the bride in the morning room for 10 minutes. Mistress and maid to present her with a Bible and a £5 note, which is a quarter's wages, and to say, as her ladyship apparently always says at these partings, that the house was sorry to lose her and glad to see her go, both of which were true. Then Dobbs drove the couple to church in the second carriage, ribbons on the whips, the whole staff given 2 hours, and the hall danced until the range needed seeing to. That is the respectable exit, the one every mother of every maid in England prays for. Service entered at 14, character kept clean, a book at the post office, and out through the front of the profession at 24, with silk on your back and the household waving, and the system, cold as its rules can be, keeps a genuine warmth for it, because Gwen's wedding was also an advertisement, as everyone involved perfectly understood. Girls compete for places at a house that marries its maids off with cake and carriage ribbons. Mothers write to Mrs. Hartley from 3 counties away on the strength of stories like that. The wedding cost the family perhaps £10 all told, and bought them a decade of the best servants in the district, which her ladyship, who releases information at mirrors and knows the price of everything gentle, has certainly calculated to the shilling. And yet Betsy keeps a ribbon from the wedding cake box pressed in her Bible, and Ellen, who caught the bride's flowers and went scarlet, walks out on Fridays with renewed purpose, and you have begun, only begun, in the part of the night just before sleeping, to wonder what colour silk her ladyship might send down, some year hence, for a housemaid called Harriet. So the machine makes even its exits into loyalty. And the strange thing, the thing you keep bumping into in this house, is that the calculation and the kindness are both real at once, all the way down. The afternoon belongs to the small kingdoms, and every kingdom below stairs has its monarch. Down a stone passage past the kitchen lies Davy's realm, the brushing room, where the hall boy stands at a wooden machine like a mangle, crossed with a barrel organ, feeding knives into its slots, turning the crank, and drawing them out silver bright, because steel knives rust at the sight of water, and must be scoured with emery every single day of their lives. Around him wait the boots, his lordships, the families, the visitors, in a regiment on the slate floor, each pair to be cleaned, blacked, polished, and returned outside its bedroom door by morning, and Davy, who is 13 and eats like a stove, polishes boots with spit and blacking and holds opinions on every foot in the house. Gentlemen, he will tell you, wear their money on their feet, and by the boots alone he can tell you which visitor is rich, which is pretending, and which, from the worn-through soul of an otherwise splendid pair, is in trouble. Intelligence he files with the rest of the hall's holdings. Across the passage glows the lamp room, and the lamp room is a ritual as much as a place. This house burns oil, dozens of lamps, and every single one must come down every single day to be emptied, its wick trimmed to a clean even edge with scissors kept for nothing else, its chimney washed and polished, its brass rubbed, its reservoir filled, because an untrimmed wick smokes, and a smoking lamp can grey a ceiling in an evening and undo a year of your bread rubbing. The work is done by James in an apron, with the windows open, in a fog of paraffin that follows him to supper, and it is the reason the whole house smells, faintly and forever, of oil and matches, a smell you already do not notice, which is how houses claim people. And at the end of the passage, in its own steamy building across the yard, thumps the laundry, a kingdom of coppers and mangles and flat irons heated in ranks at the stove, ruled by the laundry maids on a weekly calendar as fixed as the churches. Wash on Monday, dry on Tuesday, mangle Wednesday, iron Thursday, and on Friday the clean linen ascends through the house like a blessing, pressed, folded, smelling of soap and wind, and nobody upstairs has ever once wondered how. And all of that is only the indoor half of the establishment, because step through the clock arch and you are in the outdoor empire, which has its own hierarchy, its own feuds, and its own opinion of the indoor staff, which is that we are pale, soft, and tragically unacquainted with weather. The stables rule one side of the yard. Mr. Coachman Dawes, who has driven this family for 30 years, and holds that a coachman's dignity sits somewhere between a butler's and an archbishop's, plus 2 grooms and a stable boy, keeping 11 horses in a shine you could shave in. The harness room alone is a chapel, leather and brass and saddle soap warmed by its own stove, and the great travelling carriage stands under its sheet like a monument between outings. Dawes and Mr. Godfrey maintain a courteous 40-year rivalry over which of them, properly speaking, is the senior man of the establishment, a question both have privately settled in their own favour, and neither has ever put to the test, because tested questions get answered, and answered questions end rivalries, and the rivalry is the best entertainment either of them has. Across the yard and behind the wall spreads Mr. Airlie's green nation of 12, and beyond that, the estate proper, the gamekeeper in his cottage with his dogs and his silences, the carpenter's shop, smelling of shavings, the smith, the woodman, the home farm with its own small army, so that if you count every soul who eats, one way and another, off this one family, indoor and outdoor and farm and lodge, the number passes 80, and Ashcombe stops looking like a house with servants and starts looking like what it actually is, which is a village that happens to have an earl on the top floor. The indoor and outdoor worlds meet at fixed frontiers. The kitchen yard, where garden produce is handed over each morning like a customs inspection. The back door at dinner time, when the outdoor men come in for their beer. Caps off, boots left in ranks at the step. And church, on Sunday, where the whole 80 of us are visible at once. Which brings us to Sunday, because Sunday deserves its own accounting. On Sunday morning, this entire hidden nation puts on its blacks and walks to church, and the walking itself is a ceremony. The family goes by carriage, naturally, Dawes on the box in his Sunday livery. The household walks the field path in loose order of rank, Mr. Godfrey and Mrs. Hartley ahead like a constitutional monarchy out for air, the maids in the middle in their good bonnets, Davy and the stable boy at the rear understanding orders not to scuff, and in the church itself, the geography of the house is simply reassembled in oak. The family in their carved private pew at the front, the servants in the plain pews at the back. God, presumably, taking attendance of both. The vicar, a kind man who dines at the hall monthly and knows exactly which side his church is buttered, preaches obedience to the back pews and charity to the front one, in a rotation as fixed as the seasons, and yet you like Sunday. It is the 1 hour of the week when the whole parish, high and low, sits in one room and sings the same words at the same time, which never quite stops feeling like a rehearsal for some fairer arrangement. And afterward, there is the churchyard half hour, the great weekly bourse of village news, where the hall servants and the village and the farms all mingle, and where Ellen and her constable can stand together in public, in daylight, respectable as gravestones, for as long as the bells are still humming. But today, this one day of the week, the middle of your afternoon belongs to nobody but you, because today is your afternoon off. One afternoon a week, and every other Sunday, from after the servants' dinner until 9 o'clock sharp, and you have been watching it approach for 3 days the way sailors watch land. At 2:30 you climb to the attic, and here is the small ceremony nobody sees. Off comes the cap, off comes the apron, off comes Mary, and out of the tin box comes your good dress. The navy wool with the ribbon trim, And your hat, and Harriet. It is remarkable what a hat does. A cap says whose you are. A hat says only that it is a fine day, and you walk down the back drive under it feeling half a stranger to yourself. In the best possible way. The village is 2 miles by the road and 1.5 by the field path. And the field path is part of the holiday. You spend your afternoon like a duchess, spending an inheritance, which is to say, slowly and mostly on other people. A penny for peppermints at the shop, where the shopkeeper calls you Miss instead of Mary, and you would walk the 2 miles for that alone. 3p for a length of blue ribbon for your sister's birthday. 2p halfpenny for stamps. And then the post office counter, the little book slid across, 4 shillings entered in a clerk's careful hand, the running total read twice, and the walk to the churchyard bench, where you sit under the yew and write home. Dear mother, I am well. The place is a good one. The housekeeper is strict but fair. I enclose a postal order for 5 shillings. Your loving Harriet. 5 shillings home every quarter. Half the maids in that hall are doing the same sum for some cottage somewhere, which is a thing worth knowing about the gilded age you live in. Below its great houses runs a hidden river of postal orders, small silver sent home by daughters, and whole villages stand a little straighter because of it. You are back through the kitchen yard gate at 10 minutes to 9, because 9 means 9, and Mrs. Hartley at the door with the clock behind her has ended better romances than the church has. Up the back stairs, hat into the box, Harriet into the box, cap on, and down again, because the day is not done, and the house you return to is a different animal from the one you left. It is turning itself, room by room, into its evening self, and the turning is all hands. Evening at Ashcombe is a production with a fixed running order. The lamps go up first. James moving through the house with his taper and his trimmed and faithful lamps, and the rooms change temper one by one as he goes, stone and shadow warming into gold. The fires are built up, the drawing-room banked high, because her ladyship reads cold as a personal criticism. The curtains are drawn, 12 feet of velvet hauled on their rings, shutting the black country night out and the family in. And the house, which all day has looked outward at its park, turns inward toward its own bright rooms, like a mind settling on one thought. And up the back stairs, on the stroke of 6, sets off the great procession of cans. Hot water, gallons of it, in tall copper jugs with leather, wrapped handles, 1 to every bedroom washstand, plus the hip bath before her ladyship's fire, filled kettle by kettle to the depth of a hand and the temperature of a July pond. And here is your nightly arithmetic. A single lady's bath is 4 cans, 2 flights, twice, which is why housemaids in this country have forearms that surprise fairground men, and why the talk of pipes and taps upstairs someday reaches the hall the way talk of flying machines does, as a marvel for other people's grandchildren. At 7 the dressing gong sounds. 1 soft brass syllable through the whole house, and the family goes up to be transformed, and the house holds its breath between its 2 acts. This is the hour that shows you plainest what this world is. Upstairs, 4 people are changing their clothes, and to accomplish it, downstairs, 11 people are in motion. Mr. Prentice lays his lordship's evening black on the bed like a fallen general, studs in, boots warmed. Thomas and James are into their evening livery, the good plush, the powder, of which the less said the better, Thomas holds, powder being flour and tallow and a century out of date and itching like judgment, but a house of this rank powders its footman for dinner. And so at 7 each evening, 2 grown men stand in the brushing room, dusting each other's heads like a pair of scones, and in her ladyship's room begins the evening's first real performance, admission strictly 1. Miss Fanshawe dressing the Countess for dinner is 40 minutes of the highest craft in the house, and you have seen it exactly once. Carrying cans, and you think about it still. The gown tonight is the garnet silk, laid out like a sleeping woman on the bed. The jewels have come up from the plate safe, fetched by Mr. Godfrey himself with the case chained to habit, if not to his wrist, and signed for in the book he keeps of comings and goings, because between the safe and her ladyship's throat, every stone in this county travels on paper. Fanshawe builds the evening the way masons build. Foundations first, the long calculation of laces and hooks. Then the gown floated down over raised arms without disturbing a single hair, which is a physical impossibility she performs nightly. Then the hair itself, and last the garnets, cool from the strong room, warmed a moment in her own hands before they touch the Countess's neck, because a lady, Fanshawe holds, should never be made to shiver by her own jewels, and while she works, the mirror talks. This is the hidden hinge of the whole household, and it took you 5 weeks to understand it. Her ladyship, at that glass, in that low, unhurried hour, tells her maid things she tells no one else alive. What the family letter this morning really said, which neighbour is to be dropped and which cultivated, what she thinks of the bishop who is coming tonight, and of the state of Lady Georgiana's spirits, on which subject, you happen to know, the mirror hour has lately grown careful and long, and Miss Fanshawe listens, pins in her mouth, and answers in the flat, calm Peckham voice, and remembers everything. But here is the twist that makes this house worth studying. The Countess knows exactly what she is doing. She knows her maid is the best informed woman below stairs, knows the hall runs on knowledge, and so she uses the mirror hour the way governments use newspapers, releasing what she wishes released. When her ladyship wants the household to brace before bad news or stop believing a rumour, she says it, idly, hairpins in the air, to Miss Fanshawe, and by breakfast it has reached the boot room with her fingerprints nowhere on it. 2 intelligent women, 1 mirror, each perfectly aware of the other's game, each finding the arrangement excellent. It is the most honest relationship in the house, and it is conducted entirely in secrets. Meanwhile, below, the kitchen has gone to war. Tonight is a dinner party, 12 covers, the bishop among them, and a 12-cover dinner in 1888 is not a meal. It is an artillery barrage in 7 courses, and Mrs. Buckle has been laying her guns since 3 o'clock. The menu stands propped against the salt box in her own handwriting. Clear soup, turbot in a sauce that has already caused 1 scene, sweetbreads, a saddle of mutton, partridges, a charlotte russe, and ices, actual ices, in actual midsummerless December? No, ices in any month at all, which is its own small miracle. The ice having been cut from the lake last February and stacked in the ice house under straw like treasure, so that tonight's dessert is, in the most literal sense, last winter, saved. The kitchen at full boil is the loudest room you have ever stood in, and somehow perfectly ordered, a storm with a timetable. The range roars behind its bars. Copper pans, 40 of them, hang ranked on the wall by size like a peal of bells, and half of them are down and working. Betsy peels at a mountain of potatoes that never grows smaller. 2 kitchen maids chop and baste and turn. Steam stands in the room like weather. And through it all moves Mrs. Buckle, tasting with the end of a wooden spoon, adjusting, condemning, her voice pitched over the roar in the special flat calm that the staff call her cannon voice and fear far more than shouting. The sauce for the turbot broke at 6:30 and was rebuilt from butter and nerve in 9 minutes flat, an operation conducted in total silence, Nelson himself withdrawing to the passage out of professional respect. At 7:50 she wipes the rim of the soup tureen with a cloth folded to the cleanest inch, looks at it the way a general looks at a map, and says, to nobody, well, it will have to do, which is, Betsy assures you, the highest praise the kitchen ever hears. At 8 the gong goes, the double doors open, and the dining room performs its nightly miracle. A room lit by 80 candles, silver down the table like moonlight on a river, and 12 people in evening dress being served a French dinner in the middle of an English sheep county by a crew they will spend 3 hours not seeing. Serving at a dinner of this rank is drill, close order drill, and Mr. Godfrey conducts it with his eyebrows. Serve from the left, clear from the right. Thomas takes the head of the table, James the foot, and the two of them wheel and pace, and present in a silence so complete you can hear the candle flames. A footman at dinner does not cough, does not sway, does not exist from the waist up, and above all does not hear, and this is the great professional fiction of the evening, because of course he hears everything. They all hear everything. It is a room where 12 people are talking, and what the table says, with 3 servants standing in it, would curl the bishop's own hair, except that the bishop is one of the people saying it. They discuss the Milbanke engagement, which the hall buried 9 days ago. They discuss a neighbour's debts with the poor man's own footman, borrowed for the evening, standing 4 feet behind the hostess, straight as a lamppost, filing every word. A political gentleman describes, to general delight, exactly what the Prime Minister said to him privately, having first glanced around the room and seen, correctly, nobody. And late in the partridges, one guest, a sharp-faced lady from town, delivers an observation about servants nowadays, their wages, their airs, their ingratitude, in the confident, carrying voice of a woman listing the faults of the furniture to the furniture. Thomas, 4 feet away, pours her claret with a wrist as smooth as poured cream. His face does not flicker. It will flicker later. In the hall, at 11:30, when he reproduces her voice so exactly that Betsy has to sit down on the coal box. But here, now, nothing. Only the wine and the silence. And one more entry in the great downstairs ledger of everything. Tonight is 12 covers, which the hall rates as a canter. To see this house at full gallop, you must wait for November. For the shooting, when the family fills every one of the named bedrooms for a week, and the establishment doubles overnight, because the guests do not come alone. Each gentleman brings his valet, each lady her maid, some bring a loader or a groom besides, and every one of those servants must be fed, housed, ranked and absorbed, so that for 1 week the servants' hall runs to 40 places, and the attics fill like a barracks, and the back stairs at 7 in the morning are the busiest road in the county. This is the week the whole downstairs year points toward, dreaded and loved in exactly equal measure. And it is also, though nobody upstairs would think to put it this way, the week of the great exchange, because 40 servants from 11 houses at one table is not a supper, it is a congress. The protocol alone is a wonder of the world. Visiting servants are called below stairs not by their own names but by their employers' titles, to save confusion, the same courtesy that took your name now borrowing a duke's, so that the hall rings all week with sentences like, "Chatsworth, would you pass Mrs. Buckle the salt?" And, "Has anyone seen Portman about his lordship's boots?" Precedence at table is reset nightly by the rank of the masters upstairs, Mrs. Hartley presiding over the arithmetic like a herald at a coronation, and a valet whose gentleman is merely a baronet eats that week below the salt and minds it bitterly. And through it all, in both directions, flows the trade. Who is selling land? Who is marrying money? Which house keeps a bad table? Which lady's maid is leaving a countess who throws hairbrushes? And which house down in Hampshire wants a head housemaid at £26? Intelligence worth more than the wages of the week to the right listener. When the guns depart on the Saturday, each gentleman tips the men who loaded and carried. Each lady tips the maid who dressed her. The line of us at the door collects its harvest in half-crowns. And the 11 carriages roll away, carrying 11 perfectly informed households back out into the county. And the hall sleeps for a day like a fairground after the fair. And then there are the other weeks, the secret holidays, the ones printed in no calendar upstairs, the weeks when the family goes away. Twice a year or so they visit, taking Mr. Prentice and Miss Fanshawe and the best luggage, and the great machine behind them simply, softly, stops. The staterooms are put into dust sheets, the chandeliers bagged like swans asleep, the clocks allowed to run down, and the house exhales its family and becomes entirely ours. Work goes on, but it is work at half pressure. Work with the collar loosened. And the evenings, oh, the evenings. The hall after supper on an away week is the nearest thing to a club this profession possesses. Cards played for matches with gambling ferocity. The fiddle brought down from the attic by the second groom, who is wasted on horses, the table pushed back, and dancing, actual dancing, on the flags. Betsy taught to poker by Ellen, while Mrs. Buckle keeps time with a wooden spoon, and Nelson watches from the dresser like a disapproving bishop. Mrs. Hartley permits all of it with the air of a woman noticing nothing, and retires early, and if she can hear the fiddle through her sitting-room wall, and she can, she has never once said so. Even the frost, you see, takes a holiday. The family believes the house stands empty and waiting when they are gone, faithful as a dog on a grave. The truth is friendlier and much more sensible. The house, like every other servant, takes its afternoon off. While the dining room glitters, the upstairs of the house stands empty. And this is the hour that belongs to you. The strangest and most secret hour of your whole day. While they dine, the maids go up, and the bedrooms are readied for the night. And to walk a great house's bedroom floor alone, in the hush, with a candle, is to be told things no one would ever say to you. You turn down the beds, fold back counterpanes, slide the warming pans between the sheets, and draw them slowly so the linen takes the heat. You bank the fires low. You lay out nightgowns and nightshirts, set the washstands, draw the curtains against the black, and around you, the rooms confess. His lordship's bedside table holds the drainage plans, annotated past midnight in pencil, and a novel about the sea, hidden under the drainage plans. Her ladyship's holds this morning's family letter, back out of the pocket, read now to its end, and beside it a miniature of a young man in an old-fashioned coat that you have never once been told about and never once asked. And in Lady Georgiana's grate, among the coals you are banking, the black ghost of a letter, burned, but hastily, a corner surviving, 5 words in a hand, you do not know. You are not a reader of other people's letters. You bank the coals over it gently, which is its own kind of answer, and you say nothing, which is the profession's entire sacrament, and you carry your candle out past the miniature and the sea novel and the sleeping secrets of 4 human lives, and you feel, not for the first time, that nobody on earth knows this family the way the people they never look at do. Not their friends, not their cousins, perhaps not quite themselves. There is one more great rhythm of this house you should know about while we are upstairs among the dust and the secrets, and that is the year itself, because the household breathes on a 12-month cycle the way it breathes on a daily one. In the spring comes the season, when her ladyship and Lady Georgiana remove to the townhouse in London for the balls and the presentations, 3 months of it, and the removal is a military operation. The trunks brought down from the box room, the gowns packed in tissue by Miss Fanshawe over 3 entire days. The plate that travels, the linen that travels, and the staff that travels, for the townhouse keeps only a skeleton crew and borrows the rest from here. So that every April there is a solemn drawing of lots in all but name, and Thomas and Ruth and others of the chosen ride to London on the servants' ticket, 3rd class behind the family's first, to spend a summer answering bells in Mayfair. The hall divides cleanly on whether this is a prize or a sentence. London means veils, sights, followers uncountable, and the top of the profession on display. London also means attics like ovens, soot-like weather, and a season's pace that makes the shooting week look like convalescence. Ruth goes every year and returns each August half a stone lighter and completely insufferable for a fortnight, with tales of the Row and the theatres and a policeman in Curzon Street who, to Ellen's silent triumph, has never once written. And the moment the family's carriage disappears down the drive in April, the house that stays behind declares its own great annual campaign, the one the whole female staff speaks of in the voices men use for wars. The spring cleaning. For 6 weeks, with the rooms empty and the fires finally cold, the house is taken apart down to its bones and put back clean. Every carpet in the building is hauled out to the lines and beaten by the younger staff with cane paddles until the dust comes off in genuine clouds. And Betsy, who loves this beyond all reason, emerges grey as a miller. The chandeliers come down and are washed lustre by lustre in vinegar water, a full day each. The chimneys are swept, the sweep arriving at dawn with his brushes and his terrible cheerfulness. Curtains down, blankets to the coppers, mattresses turned and beaten, paintwork washed with soda, floors scoured white, the whole vast body of the house scrubbed, aired, polished, mended and reassembled, so that when the family returns in July to rooms smelling of beeswax and lavender, looking exactly as they left them, they will notice nothing at all, and the noticing of nothing, as you know by now, is this profession's only standing ovation. The hall aches for 6 weeks and is obscurely, deeply satisfied for 6 more. A house is like a conscience, Mrs. Hartley says, once a year you must get to the bottom of it, or live above things you would rather not name. The servants take their supper late, when the dining room is into its dessert and the urgent work is over, and supper is the hall at its ease, the 1 hour of the day when the room belongs to itself. The food is bread and cheese and whatever has come down, because what comes down is one of the hall's institutions. The dishes return from a dinner party bearing their beautiful ruins, half a Charlotte Russe, the underworked side of the saddle of mutton, partridge that the sharp-faced lady waved away. And by ancient right, the ruins are eaten here, at the long table, by candlelight, so that on party nights the servants of this house dine, at 10 minutes' remove, precisely as well as the county's finest, minus only the plates being warm. Betsy gets the cream. Davy gets what Davy always gets, which is everything nobody else is guarding. And then the hall relaxes, and you would not trade this hour for 2 of the afternoon off. The fire settles. Mrs. Buckles sits with her shoes eased half off and her feet on a stool, pronounced dead until morning. Someone deals cards. Ellen mends by the lamp and thinks her Friday thoughts. The newspaper, now 3 days old and soft as flannel, is read aloud in instalments by James, who does the law reports in a judge's voice. And Thomas, at last, gives the performance the whole day has been rehearsing, the sharp-faced lady, rendered to the syllable, her servants' nowadays speech delivered to the actual servants, now seated, now eating her partridge. And the hall laughs the low, rich, careful laugh of people who must not be heard laughing, which is, you have decided, the best laughter there is. Mr. Godfrey, passing through with his keys, pauses in the doorway just long enough to be seen not noticing, which is his way of joining in. Davy falls asleep with bread in his hand. Nelson claims the warm stone in front of the fire, like an invoice being settled. For 1 hour, the engine room is simply a room, and the crew is simply itself, and the house above might as well be weather. And were this a Saturday, the hall's ease would end in the week's most jealously guarded ritual, which is bath night. Because, yes, the people who carry 40 cans of hot water a day up 2 flights for other people's bodies must queue for their own, once a week, in the scullery, where the long tin bath comes down off its wall hook after supper, and the copper is stoked one last time, and the great rotor unrolls in an order set by rank, and defended like the throne. Upper servants, first in the privacy of their own rooms, cans carried to them, by whoever is newest, which is you, then the maids in the scullery with the door bolted, and a sheet pinned over the window, 2 kettles each and 1 in reserve. Then the men, last, in water whose history is best not dwelt on. You wash your hair with rainwater from the soft water butt, because the well water here is hard as a magistrate and turns soap to curd. And you dry it by the range in the smell of soap and singeing, and Ellen reads out the cereal from the story paper, while 6 heads steam gently in a row. And if the family upstairs, soaking nightly in their fireside tubs, ever wondered how their staff manages the matter, which they have not, the answer is, like everything else, in order of precedence, with the newest carrying the cans. The rest of the week, cleanliness is a science of basins. The cold splash at 5:30, the good scrub at night, wrists and collar line and face, the strip wash on Wednesdays, standing on a towel in the attic with the candle guttering. And through all of it, the profession's one unbreakable commandment, drummed into every maid at every level, which is that whatever your body did to earn its keep today, you present tomorrow morning clean, collared, capped and creaseless, because a house is judged by its housemaid's aprons the way a regiment is judged by its boots. Mrs. Hartley can price a household in one glance at the between-maid's cuffs, and does, everywhere she visits. Your mother, who was in service herself before she married, sent you off with the whole doctrine in one sentence, and it has turned out to contain most of what the printed card was trying to say. Nobody, she said, can stop you being poor, but nobody on this earth can stop you being clean. And in a clean collar, my girl, you can stand in front of anybody. You have stood in front of an earl, a bishop, and the frost itself in your 5 weeks, and the collar has held. It is a strange armour. It is the only one issued at your rank. And it works, but every warm room has a draught under some door. And it would be dishonest, in an account of the secret life of servants, to leave out the cold one. Everyone at that table lives 1 bad week from ruin, and everyone at that table knows it. The machinery is simple. A servant dismissed needs a character, the written reference from the last employer, and a servant dismissed without one is, in the language of the trade, done. No registry office will list her, no respectable house will hear of her, and there is no appeal, because the law leaves the character entirely to the employer's grace. He may refuse to give one at all. Around that single fact, the whole profession arranges itself like iron filings. Breakages come out of wages. That is merely arithmetic. But theft, or the appearance of theft, or drink, or a follower discovered indoors, or worst of all for a maid, being got into trouble, as the hall says it, softly, meaning a child coming. Any of these is the cart at the kitchen door and the box on the cart and a reference that will never be written. You have seen it once already in your 5 weeks. A kitchen maid at a neighbouring house turned off at a day's notice over a missing lace collar that the daughter of that house, it later emerged, had lent to a friend. The collar came back. The kitchen maid did not. The hall discussed it for a week in the tone surgeons use for a botched operation at another hospital. Quietly, precisely, and with the unspoken understanding that the same knife hangs over every table in the county. And yet the power does not all run one way, and this is the part the sharp-faced lady will never understand. Servants have their own weapons, and the first is notice. A month's notice, either side, is the custom. And in a country with more places than good servants, a first-rate cook or a trained parlourmaid can walk and walk upward, and everyone knows it, which is why Mrs. Buckle's feuds are always with fishmongers and never with the Countess. The second weapon is the same network that carries the gossip, because it carries verdicts too. Houses have reputations below stairs, just as servants have characters above them. and a house that starves its hall, or works maids past enduring, or has a master with wandering hands, becomes known, quietly, from registry office to registry office, until it finds it can hire only the desperate and the passing through, and must pay over the odds for them, and sits there wondering aloud, at its own glittering table, why one cannot get servants nowadays. The market, it turns out, reads the references in both directions. Nobody prints the downstairs ledger. It is simply known the way the creaking boards are known, and it is the nearest thing to justice this profession has. And there is one more mercy to record on the credit side of this house. And you record it with feeling, because you have seen the ledger kept both ways. Last winter, before your time, Ruth took a fever, a real one, a fortnight of it, and here is what happened: nothing, which is to say, everything. The doctor was sent for from the village, twice, at his lordship's expense and without discussion. Ruth was moved to the warm little room off the still room that Mrs. Hartley keeps for exactly this, nursed on beef tea and the black currant bottle and the one that is mostly brandy. Her work was divided down the corridor without a word, and her wages ran on, and when she was on her feet 3 weeks later her place was simply there, waiting like a chair pushed back from a table. You would think this unremarkable. Kindness being cheap, it is the opposite of unremarkable. The hall knows houses and knows them by name, where a servant's fever is a servant's notice, where the doctor's shilling comes out of the maid's own book if he comes at all, and where 3 weeks in bed ends with the box on the cart and a character that says, with faint praise sharpened to a blade, that she was willing when her health allowed. There is no law in England that decides which kind of house you land in. There is only luck, and the network, and the quiet grading that the profession never stops doing. A good place, a hard place, a place to hold with both hands. This is a good place. Everyone at the long table knows the weight of that sentence, which is why, when the agency letters come around, as they do, offering £2 more elsewhere, the letters mostly end their lives as spills for the fire. £2 does not buy a warm room off the still room. £2 does not buy the frost standing guard between you and a winter on the roads. So why stay? Why does anyone stand at that gate at 2:20, or carry the 4 cans up the 2 flights? Or answer to a name their mother never gave them? Look down the supper table and you can read the answer at every place, because every place is a rung on a ladder, and everyone here is climbing. Betsy peels her mountains because scullery leads to kitchen maid, and kitchen maid leads to cook, and a cook is a monarch who names her own wages in her own kitchen for life. Davy blacks his regiments of boots because hall boy leads to footman, and Thomas wears the itching powder because first footman leads to under butler, and at the top of that staircase stands Mr. Godfrey, who began at 11 years old in a house smaller than this one's stables, cleaning knives exactly as Davy cleans them, and who is now, by any honest measure, one of the most powerful men in the parish. The ladder is real. It is slow. It eats decades. It asks your knees and your Sundays and your name. But it is real, and at the top of it, or even halfway up, stand the dreams, and the hall knows every one of them by heart. Ellen's cottage with the police garden, Mrs. Buckle's tea shop in a seaside town, 3rd Street back from the front. She has the street picked. Mr. Godfrey's public house, gold letters on green, the Alderton Arms, and him behind his own bar at last, pouring for no one he does not like. And yours, which you have told nobody, and which is not a shop or a cottage at all, but simply this, a room, some day, with a lock on the inside of the door, and your own name on the rent book. Every quarter day, the little books at the post office grow 4 shillings at a time toward all of it. And once a year, on one glittering December night, the whole strange 2-nation arrangement of this house turns briefly, wonderfully, upside down, and you have this to look forward to. 5 weeks in, because the hall has already begun discussing it the way children discuss the sea. On the night after Christmas comes the servants' ball. The ballroom, the actual ballroom, is thrown open for the staff, indoor and outdoor together, 80 strong, with the fiddler from the village and the second groom besides, and the family attends as guests at their own servants' party. And here is the sacred, inviolable custom of the night. His lordship opens the dancing with Mrs. Hartley, and her ladyship takes the floor with Mr. Godfrey, and the four of them lead off the first country dance under the chandeliers Betsy washed in April, while the whole hall claps the time. For one night the Earl fetches lemonade for kitchen maids. For one night Mrs. Buckle sits while somebody else carries, and Davy, scrubbed to shining and taller than last year, dances with Lady Georgiana, who requests him every year because he dances, she says truthfully, better than anyone she meets in London. There are gifts on the ball morning, and they are not trinkets: a dress, length of good wool for every maid, cloth for a suit for every man, an orange and a shilling for the youngest, and the tradesmen's Christmas boxes besides, so that the season leaves every book at the post office a little heavier, and at the end of the night the family withdraws, bowing, actually bowing, to its own household, and the fiddler plays on for us alone until 1 in the morning, and the year's whole silent contract, all the invisibility, all the bells, all the frost and the folded faces, is, for a few hours, acknowledged, out loud, in the finest room in the house. It does not change the other 364 days. It is not meant to, but you will remember every servant's ball of your life to the end of it. And so, though they would be surprised to hear it said, will they? But before this house can sleep, it must survive the night, and the enemy it fears is not the burglar behind Mr. Godfrey's pistol, it is the flame. Stop and count the fires you have tended since 5:30 this morning, the candles burning at this moment in bedrooms and passages, the lamps, the range, the night lights, and understand that this house, like every great house in England, is a timber-hearted mountain of dry oak, wax, oil and fabric, kept alive all day by several hundred small deliberate fires, any one of which, left alone with a curtain for a quarter of an hour, would take the whole 2 centuries of it to the ground before the horses could be led out. Every county has its burned house, its blackened shell behind lime trees that people drive past and go quiet, and this county has one too. And the hall speaks of that family the way sailors speak of drowned ships. So the house lives by the fire rules, and the fire rules are the only rules at Ashcombe with no humour in them anywhere. Candles travel in lanterns or holders with wide feet. Never bare. No candle is ever, under any sun or circumstance, left burning in an empty room, and a maid who forgets one, even the frost seems gentle beside what follows. The leather fire buckets hang in a row in the back passage, filled every Monday, and there are canvas hoses coiled by the attic stairs, and a great brass hand pump in the stable block that is exercised 4 times a year by the outdoor men, with a solemnity the church itself does not command. And the last hour of every servant's evening is built around the doctrine. Fires raked low and guarded, hearths swept of the least spark, lamps carried down and out, and the candle you will presently take up to bed accounted for, in Mrs. Hartley's book, by number, because candles are issued and stubs are counted, partly for thrift, and partly so that the house knows exactly how many small fires it has sent upstairs to sleep among its sleeping people. When you blow yours out tonight between finger and thumb, you will do it the way Ellen taught you the first week. Watch the wick until the red star in it dies entirely, count 5, touch it, then dark. Every maid in England does the same small ritual, millions of red stars watched out nightly across the whole breathing country. And that patience, repeated forever, is the only reason the great houses are still standing to be told about. The family sleeps in a wooden mountain full of flame, and never thinks of it once. Somebody thinks of it for them all night, every night. By now, you will not need telling who. At 11, the last carriage crunches away down the drive, the bishop having stayed for one more glass than his coachman predicted, though not than the hall predicted, the hall having known the bishop for years. The drawing-room bells fall silent, and through the quieting house, with his flat candlestick in one hand and his keys in the other, Mr. Godfrey begins the locking up, and if the day at Ashcombe has a closing ceremony, this is it. And tonight, because the footmen are still at the glasses, you are sent to carry his candle, which is an honour, Ellen assures you, extended to perhaps one housemaid a year. It is a slow procession through a great sleeping animal of a house. The shutters first, room by room, folded across the tall black windows and barred with iron, each bar dropping into its slot with a soft final sound like a full stop. The doors, the garden door, the gun-room door, the great front door with its lion, locked and chained, and the keys turning with a weight you can hear, 2 centuries of oil and iron. In the pantry, the silver is counted, tonight of all nights, every fork of the dinner home from the wars, and told off against its list, and the plate safe swings shut on the candelabra and the garnets together, and Mr. Godfrey turns the handle twice, which is not necessary, and pats the door once, which is not either. The lamps go out one by one behind you as you walk. James's whole golden evening unmade in 20 minutes, and the dark folds up the house room by room the way you fold linen, until the last lamp of all is the one in Mr. Godfrey's hand, and the two of you stand in a hall the size of a church, in one small circle of light, in a silence so complete you can hear the case clock gathering itself to strike. He looks around him once, at the dark he has made and locked and counted, the way a captain looks at a sea he distrusts and loves, and he says, quietly, "To the house as much as to you. Well then, good night." And the house, settling on its beams, says something back that is not quite a word. And then the last climb, the one your legs do without being asked, up the stone spiral in the candle's little weather, past the sleeping corridors, up to where the ceilings slope and the carpets stop, and into the attic room where Ruth is already asleep with her braid over her face, exactly as you found her 17 hours ago, as if the whole enormous day between had been something the two of you dreamed. You undress by candlelight, cold, quick habit, and you kneel a moment by the bed because your mother asked you to, and because, honestly, by this hour it is the only comfortable position left, and then the blankets, and the deep cold sheets warming slowly to the shape of you, and the candle out between finger and thumb, and the house talks you down towards sleep the way it talks every night, in its own old language, the case clock striking the half-hour 2 floors below, softened by all that wood and wool, the wind trying the shutters once and giving up. A last ember settling somewhere in a grate you cleaned before dawn and will clean again after it. The stable clock, half a beat behind the house clock, the two of them disagreeing politely about midnight across the dark yard. And under everything, that great wooden breathing that old houses do, beam by beam, as the day's heat leaves them, which Betsy says is the house going over its lists, and which you are too nearly asleep to doubt. And here, in the warm dark under the roof, with the whole locked shining house below you like a ship under its crew, you finally have the answer to the question we began with, the secret in the secret life of Victorian servants. And it is not the dripping money, or the mirror hour, or the burned letter, or even the network that outruns the newspapers. It is this, and it is so large that nobody in the family has ever seen it. The house believes it keeps you. Every soul upstairs would tell you, kindly enough, that 30 servants live on the Earl's generosity, in the shelter of his name, and every soul below the green door knows, without ever once saying it, that it is exactly, precisely, the other way around. You keep them. You keep their fires and their hours and their health, their silver and their letters and their secrets, their marriages steady and their children fed, and their whole bright painted world upright on its stage. 30 pairs of hands holding up the ceiling they dance on, and doing it so well, so quietly, so invisibly, that the dancers have genuinely never wondered why the ceiling holds. It is the grandest secret in England, and it is kept in plain sight, in every great house from here to the border, by people whose names the ledgers never learned. The family sleeps because you locked the doors. The county turns because 1,000 kitchens turn it, and nobody claps, and nobody knows, and the wages are £16 a year, and the work is the world itself, held up, held steady, held safe, every single day, by the people nobody sees. You did that. Today, all of it was you. Let that be the thought you fall asleep holding, the way you would hold something warm, carried carefully up 2 flights of stairs. So tonight, as you lie in your own bed, in your own century, notice, just once, the quiet luxuries of it. No bell can reach this room. No board hangs on any wall of your life with your hours painted under a brass spring. Your name, the one your mother gave you, is the one on everything you own, and nobody has ever taken it away to save confusion. Whatever your day held, and however invisible your own work sometimes feels, the machinery of it is switched off now, and no one will ring for you before dawn. And spare a soft last thought for them, the crew of the great sleeping ship. For Betsy, who will be singing to the range in 6 hours, and for Davy, asleep on his folding bed beside the silver with bread still in his hand. For Ellen and her constable saving toward the cottage 4 minutes at a time at the kitchen yard gate. For Miss Fanshawe, born Fanny Shaw, keeping a countess's secrets and her own in the same perfect order. And for Mrs. Buckle, whose feet have earned the seaside, and for Mr. Godfrey, patting the safe good-night on his way to the pistol that probably does not fire. For Nelson, employed and magnificent and fast asleep in front of a fire some housemaid laid before the sun came up. And for her, for Harriet, who answers to Mary, asleep at last under the roof of the world she carries, with £11 and 4 shillings in a book 2 miles away, growing slowly toward a door with a lock on the inside. The house is dark now. The shutters are barred, the silver is counted, the lamps are out, and the long day is folded and put away like linen, smelling of soap and wind. Let the bells hang silent on their springs. Let the fires sleep in their clean grates. Let the whole great house breathe, beam by beam, going over its lists in the dark, and let it carry you down with it, gently, the way everything in it was carried, up and down, all day, by hands that never once dropped what they held,